So good morning to all of you. It's great to have you here. Always a bit difficult on the last day. I hope you enjoyed the dinner party and the plenary this morning, which I thought was really very, very interesting and very many good ideas that we should continue forward. I'm very happy to be here moderating. My name is Dirk Hoffmann. I'm from DEVAL, the German Development Evaluation Institute based in Bonn. And I have a very distinguished panel, which I'm very proud of and very happy to have them all here. So I hope you enjoy the presentations, and we hope that we afterwards enjoy the discussion, the questions that might come up. We do not have a whole lot of time, so I will very briefly present them to you, and they will have the opportunity to later on go into more detail of their biography and if they deem that necessary to understand better the context. So first to my side is Carolina Zuniga. Carolina is from the evaluation unit of the Ministry of National Planning and Economic Policy, Mideplan in Costa Rica. So one of the cases presented is Costa Rica. Next to her, Ada Ocampo, the president of a global network, IDEAS, the International Development Evaluation Association, that had a global conference co-organized with DEVAL going on in a virtual format just a month ago. Next to her is Bala Yusuf Yunusa. He is Senior Technical Advisor at the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs in Nigeria. So welcome. Next to him, we have Ana Rosa Suarez, Chief of Corporate Evaluations for the Independent Evaluation Office of UNDP. So welcome to you as well. Last but not least, Erico Flores from Mexico, Executive Secretary of the State Council for the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. So with that brief introduction, let me jump to the topic that brings us here and that fascinates all of us, and I hope you as well, the evaluation of Sustainable Development Goals. As we've heard before, we're almost halfway through. We have a very interesting and extensive monitoring exercise, the voluntary national reviews that many of you might have been involved, that every country around the world is basically doing. Some countries have done already 2 editions, 3 editions, informing where we are moving ahead towards achieving the SDGs. We've also heard that because of crisis, multiple crises, excuse me? Okay, so I'm sorry, I thought, yeah, but we can continue, I understand. Okay, so many countries have presented already a 2nd edition, some countries even a 3rd edition of the voluntary national reports informing progress towards achieving the SDGs. And what we found is this is very much focused on monitoring. And we've just heard the call to better get together monitoring and evaluation. And it's not either or and who's doing better and who is more important. But I think this is one of the things I'd like to also talk about a bit, how to bring those 2 things together. Evaluation will always be able to tell us why are we where we are? Why haven't we advanced faster? And evaluation is much needed to orient public policy, the design of policy, and then the implementation of policy. So this is what we're trying to do with the question that has been posed: have we failed to evaluate the SDGs to inform change? Have we done sufficient to draw lessons from our advance or lack of advance on achieving the SDGs? And we've looked around the world and we can see there are very few evaluations that are explicitly directed to the SDGs, to the 2030 agenda. So the idea of this panel is to bring together some of the experience existing with 3 country cases. In that order, we'll have the presentation: Costa Rica, Mexico, and Nigeria, followed by comments on those country cases, lessons learned, challenges, opportunities that we can derive from those country cases. And then at the end, we have Ana Rosa from the IEO office of UNDP presenting a project on SDG synthesis. So we're coming from the specific, from the countries to the more general. Without further ado, we do start with Carolina Zuniga from the Ministry of Planning and National Economic Policy in Costa Rica. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dirk. And well, thank you everyone to showing up to the presentation. And well, I'm very pleased to be here and get the chance to share a little bit of the experience of Costa Rica. Okay. Okay. Well, first, before I get a little bit more into the evaluation that we did for the thematic evaluation that we did with the SDGs 2030 Agenda Focus, I would like to bring you a little bit of context on how we work in Costa Rica regarding the national evaluation system and all the work that we do in evaluation. And first is that part of that is that regulatory framework allow us to work in the evaluation field, especially because Mideplan is the steering institution for the public administration regarding monitoring and evaluation. And we also have different regulatory in the constitution, different laws and decrees. There's also other institutions in the country who works in the evaluation field. So this is part of the work that we do throughout the public administration. We also have evaluation planning instruments. For example, the National Evaluation Agenda is included in the National Development Plan, which is something that allowed us to prioritize which intervention will be evaluated throughout the governmental period. We also frame our work in the National Evaluation Policy, which is one of the most important instruments that we use to pretty much align different stakeholders in the country to work in evaluation. And we develop different methodological guidelines that structure the evaluation process for different representatives of the public administration so they can have like resources to better manage and evaluate their own interventions. But how we included the SDGs in the 2030 agenda analysis in our evaluation? First, we decided that with the 2018-2022 National Evaluation Agenda, we are going to incorporate at least one of these components inside of the evaluations. So the regular approach that we do, at least at 5 interventions so far, is that we included a question link to the relevance criteria, where we pretty much ask how the intervention program, project, strategy, national plan is linked to the SDGs, to the principle of the 2030 agenda, and specifically how that intervention is kind of reaching the goals or is linked to indicators of the SDGs. However, we find out that that was not enough, and we needed to deepen the scope of the SDGs in the 2030 agenda. And we decided that we are going to take like one big example. It was a thematic evaluation on biodiversity and climate change. And we use this as a cross-cutting issue inside this evaluation. So for this, we, besides of the regular question regarding the relevance criteria, we included specific questions with different teams or analysis teams to link to the principles of the 2030 agenda. We included at least 3 principles that we also get very important information with. And we also identify if the different programs and projects that are linked to the biodiversity and climate change issue, if they were linked specifically or explicitly, they were linked with the SDGs, if they were planning to reach any specific goal regarding the principle and the SDGs. So in this case, we got very important information. I don't know. Can you click for the next? It's not working, the clicker. Okay.
Okay, here it is.
Thank you. And well, this was the evaluation that I was talking about, the evaluation of non-reversible international cooperation in biodiversity and climate change received by Costa Rica. And again. Okay, and why was this evaluation chosen? First, it was a very technical interest from the area of international cooperation to review the management of results of the non-reimbursable international cooperation. It was also an interest in reviewing the contribution to fulfilling the biodiversity and climate change related SDGs. These number 1 and 2 issues right here was pretty much the reason why we decided to include it, this specific topic in this big evaluation. One important thing that pretty much allow us to do this big evaluation was the support of governmental authorities, the Minister of Planning, but also the President of the Republic was very interested in the results of this evaluation. And of course, this evaluation was part of the national evaluation agenda. Why this evaluation was innovative, at least for Costa Rica, is because it was the first thematic evaluation from the Costa Rican national evaluation agenda. So we had no previous experience on evaluating thematic inside the agenda. So this was a big issue for us. We were not sure if our guidelines were giving us the right path to evaluate such a complex thematics as biodiversity and climate change. It was a country-led evaluation. For the first time in the region, an evaluation is led out from the cooperation recipient country instead of the donor, which is pretty much the common practice in our country. We also perform a systematization of the whole process, of the whole evaluation process, because we wanted to collect good practices and the face challenges and lessons learned so we can, let's say again, learn from these specific challenges. And in case that we perform another evaluation, we can do things better in the future and also help some other countries if they want to start a related evaluation. And of course, the links with the SDGs and with this kind of scope, we didn't do it before. So the central tidbit of the evaluation, we wanted to know if it were linked with the 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals. And how we did it, it was a very long process. It took us almost 2 years to complete this evaluation because of the complexity of the different stakeholders of the process itself. So it took us different work sessions just to get the information that we need. We also performed different workshop to delimit the object and scope of the evaluation with different stakeholders. Once that we created some inputs and initial matrix, we identified that there's some information that it was missing that we needed to complete before we continue with the process. So for that reason, we also carry out a contracting for a characterization study and a behavioral analysis that allow us to give some perspective on how were the most important trends of international cooperation and some information regarding the different programs and projects that we needed. And well, once that we have the final matrix proposal, again, we did another round of validation with the different stakeholders just to make sure that we were satisfying the most important needs. And finally, because I think that my time was almost up. Okay. Some of the lessons learned from this process, evaluating 2030 agenda and SDGs in our evaluation is first that complying with the SDGs require to guarantee that the institutions design policies consider the 2030 agenda. And in this case, this include to the foresight of targets, probably the development of ex-ante evaluations that will enable a better formulation of policies. We also need to clarify where should non-stakeholders, non-state stakeholders may contribute and be clear enough about policy outcomes that we want to achieve in every one of our interventions. We also foster advisory to institutions and stakeholders from different sectors in order to set baseline. This is one of the most important findings, that if we want in the future to do something similar, we need to have better baseline and for monitoring results and set evaluability requirements that will enable more and better evaluation in the future. And last but not least is that this evaluation, due to its broad scope, findings, and conclusions, it constitutes a starting point that they can be developed in subsequent evaluation exercise. And this is pretty much the reason why we're right now starting another process, trying to incorporate these lessons learned and challenges and do it much better next year, and probably having the most deep evaluation regarding SDGs. We know there is probably not as big and robust as Nigeria or Finland have done it, but well, it's our little project that is still in development. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A round of applause. Thank you, Carolina, for this very exciting experience from Costa Rica. There is a lot of material documented, most of it in Spanish, some of it short versions in English as well, and you can approach Carolina afterwards if that is of interest. Okay. No, I think now I'm okay. What I said is thank you very much for this exciting presentation on the example of Costa Rica. There is documentation on the process and on the evaluation, most of it in Spanish more extensively, but some things in English as well. We continue right away with our next speaker, Erica Flores from Mexico. Would you like to come up? Would you like to talk from? Okay, I'll hand over the microphone to you directly.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Well, I will present to you a collaboration experience. Hello. Okay.
Yeah, no.
It's better?
No.
Takes a moment. Wait a moment. Yeah. No, just wait a moment.
Okay. It's okay. It's right. That's right. Okay. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I will present you a collaboration experience between the government of the state of Mexico and the UNDP. It is an exercise to identify development accelerators to allow reducing the inequality gaps between regions, municipalities, and social groups based on the SDGs. Based on the methodologies of combos focus accelerators and mainstreaming acceleration and policy support, the MAPS, through a call for a participatory planning dialogue tables were established between sectors and identify a list of priorities with different levels of disaggregation was formed. Thus, the challenges were identified. Sorry, it's not function.
Just go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the challenges were identified are how to build easy and understandable narratives about sustainable development for decision makers at the local level. And second, the localization of the 2030 agenda implies developing local capacities. How? First, identify interactions between SDGs. And second, developing the infrastructure to improve projects and programs with a sustainable approach, working with a specific acceleration projects. And this is the clue. As you know, the next please, thank you. As you know, the three significant aspects addressed at 2030 agenda to advance sustainable development are economic, social, and the green agenda. When we talk about economic aspect, we know that development is not equal to economic growth. The social aspect makes evident the inequalities of our societies, not only those are further behind, but also since COVID-19 in the middle income countries such as Mexico. And of course, the aspect related to the environment, whose limits in the interaction with the human being has reached a limitation that forces us all to act in defense of global public goods as avoid overheating. Next, please. In this sense, and recognizing the multi-level condition of this perspective, the issue is how to reconcile the global agenda with the national one and the local one. Let's see the priorities at each level and why it is necessary to align. So if we saw the international, national, and subnational and local level, there are different level and kind of priorities. This is the main challenge of VNRs or LVRs. The next, please. At this point in the topic, the question is how to prioritize. So if we saw the challenges or priorities of the 2030 agenda, we could see the 5 Ps. The people has 5 SDGs. Planet, 5 SDGs. Prosperity, 5 SDGs. But peace also has 1. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. But not one goal speaks specifically what to do in case of war. This is one of the limits of the 2030 agenda. And of course, one SDG for the partnership for the goals. So the next, please. So in such a way that to land the agenda in concrete action, it is necessary to ask ourselves, what kind of issues get our attention? From who? How did match the agendas? And finally, what is the reason to make difference between one issue and another? So the complexity of implementing, monitoring, and evaluating or evaluation of public policies related to the SDGs, it's a big challenge. Finally, what is the meaning of local? It is the evolution of the way we understand the state concept from unidimensional version to a multidimensional, multi-actoral, and multi-scale one. Let me show you. It is passed through from sectoral programming to territorial policies. Second, from decentralization to territorial governance. And this is one of the main, how to construct governance. Third, from resources transference to development of territorial endogenous capacities. And finally, from official subsidized to territorial cohesion. That's why monitoring and evaluation is changing their paradigms. Finishing. In this collaboration with UNDP, we reached some findings. When we compare one urban region in green with a rural region in blue, we could see in the first graph the capacities. And the capacities of municipalities are, first, look at diagnosticate. Urban and rural has not capacities to diagnosticate. Because further away, better skills. When we look at formulate strategic policies, they have it. Budget, manage, and implement, they have it. Municipal functional capacities, they have it. But look at evaluate. Municipalities doesn't have the capacity to have a real evaluation process or institutionalized evaluation processes. When we saw indicators of social deprivation, we can look the gap between the main aspects of development. Look, for example, the lack of access to health services. All rural and urban has a big gap. A big lack and a big gap. Then lack of access to social security. And, for example, lack of quality of housing spaces. So, yeah. I'm finishing. When we took an example, let's see the case of SDG number 5, it has 6 goals whose target intersections with 17 SDGs generate a total of 22 interactions. But when you saw this table, you could see the main aspects of on where municipalities can work, and it's better to understand the narrative, the action of implementing, and of course the monitoring and evaluating. I leave it here, and I'm going to make a closure later. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this exciting presentation on the case of Mexico and taking us to the subnational level, which I think in many countries has not even been thought about. Many countries were still at the national level and thinking about how to do evaluation of SDGs. So this, I think, is a really great example. We are moving now from Latin America to the African continent, and we have Bala Yusuf with us from Nigeria, and he will have the floor. So I think you also want to speak from here. Well, the presentation will come up and the microphone is working, and so just go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Dick, and very good afternoon, colleagues. I think I negotiated that system, the only African. I will have more time to talk in the midst of two South American countries and then one Africa. So I will have more time to talk. I just hope that this presentation will inspire countries to begin to do policy evaluation around the SDGs. So I will just be sharing useful insights on how we undertook a successful country-led evaluation of priority SDGs. Let me start by arguing that the Nigerian government has shown commitment to the overall implementation of the 2030 agenda. And when I say commitment, I actually want to be conceptually clear, because when we say political commitment, it doesn't show where the commitment itself comes from. But so how do I argue? Evaluation, for example, what we're going to discuss today, does not happen in a vacuum. It has to be underpinned by something. And in the case of Nigeria, we have a dedicated office of the President on Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the fourfold mandate of that office is monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. In 2016, we had conducted baseline mapping, and we had, from that identification of the gap, worked with our National Bureau of Statistics to realign the national statistical system with the requirements and indicators of the SDGs. So through our national statistical system, we'll be able to track the 230 key performance indicators on an annual basis. Then we worked to domesticate our integrated sustainable development goal simulation model, which is a homegrown analytical tool for SDG-based planning. So we use that at the national level to do our national development plan. that is SDG based. In 2016, Nigeria found itself in an economic recession, and we needed to craft a medium-term national development plan, 2017 to 2020. We made sure the 3 dimensions of the SDGs were embedded in that plan. At the sectoral level, health, education, environment, all of these ministries embedded the relevant SDGs into their sectoral policies and plans. I'm saying this because it gives the background on how best to go about doing policy evaluation around the SDGs when I talked about the methodological and conceptual approach. Still on commitment, we have presented our first voluntary national review in July 2017, and in 2020, we presented the second voluntary national review. We commenced the process 4 years into the implementation of the SDGs. We felt that the evaluation literature tells us that impact evaluation can happen between 4 to 5 years. How did we arrive at evaluating these SDGs? We had the National Development Plan, the one I made reference to, Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP 2017 to 2020. And in 2019, when we commenced the process of evaluating the SDGs, we said among the 17 SDGs, which ones are our priority SDGs based on our national development priorities. And we interrogated the plan, and we found 5 SDGs speaks directly to that national development aspiration. And that was SDG 1, SDG 3, 4, 5, and 8. So we went about through a whole of government and whole of society approaches. We went for a capacity building workshop where we brought all the key monitoring and evaluation officers in all the ministries, departments, and agencies to a capacity building workshop, because we also recognize that evaluation capacity is lacking, especially in the core civil service. We together to fast track, jointly prioritize these 5 SDGs, and then also ranked them. SDG 3 on qualitative health and well-being came first. SDG 4 on qualitative and inclusive education and lifelong learning came second. And then SDG 1 on no poverty came third, based on that ranking by all the critical stakeholders, including members of the civil society, Nigerian Association of Evaluators, and all that. So we agreed to go with the 3 because of the paucity of resources. And this is the first ever country-led evaluation of the SDGs. And we needed to learn also from that process. Today, we have, by 25th of August this year, we have successfully launched SDG 3 and SDG 4 country-led evaluation of the SDGs. And this process took us 2 years, largely because of COVID-19 pandemic, because we began the process early in 2020, and then by March 25th, the lockdowns came, and we were unable to go for the primary data collection across, because education is on the concurrent legislative list, and we needed to go to the states to conduct primary research. So that affected, actually, we would have finished that earlier than now. Our methodological approach, we said we conducted this evaluation for learning, accountability, and evidence-based voluntary national review reporting. I will not take too much time. The slides will be shared. It was a policy analysis, and we did some multivariate data analysis on health and education. And then we did comparative analysis among the states. Nigeria has a huge implementation context for the SDGs. 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, and then 774 local governments. So that is about that. We used the evaluation framework, used largely the OECD criteria, and then we added the 2 principles of SDGs, leave no one behind, and the human rights principles. So for the sake of time, I'm rushing this process, but I hope that the question and answer section will enable us to elaborate more on these issues. We argue from our experience that, unlike the normal notion that evaluation is a purely technocratic exercise. In our own case, I think you need the right political commitment to say, let's evaluate SDGs. And I think today's plenary has discussed ideas around that, trying to let us not think that evaluation is only a technocratic endeavor. You need that political commitment. You need that, and commitment comes with resources, because you need the resources to be able to conduct country-led evaluation. And that political commitment comes with saying that, yes, we are committed to implementing the SDGs, and part of the process is to make sure the follow-up and review mechanisms through the voluntary national review is to make sure that we're able to follow up what is happening and how are we doing in terms of, our commitment to the implementation of the SDGs. And you can only do that through evaluation. Even the voluntary national reviews are more useful and helpful when they are evidence-based, and evaluation will provide that evidence. We have used the VNR, the evaluation, some of the preliminary findings to strengthen our second voluntary national review in 2020 July that we presented. Capacity building must be integral part of country-led evaluation process, because out there we have depth of capacity issues around evaluation. In fact, in the civil service, it's hardly a career, but you just find some economists, sociologists trying to do or learn as we go. So it has to be integral part of it. Technical and financial support of development partners is also crucial, because once we commence that process, UNICEF was there all through with us, and we appreciate also that sort of support. So just to conclude, country-led evaluation of the SDGs is more of a political undertaking than a technocratic undertaking. I've argued that the Nigerian government has demonstrated commitment, in fact, strong commitment towards the overall implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as is evident in all the institutional mechanisms that I've enumerated, right from the data mapping, the realignment of the national statistical system, the customization of the integrated sustainable development simulation model, to the first and second voluntary national reviews. And to last month, we actually designed our integrated national financing framework that will support the implementation of not only the SDGs, but also our national development plan that is ongoing. And also, in this process that we've started since 2019, we are now supporting and promoting actively a standalone United Nations General Assembly resolution on country-led evaluation to complement the voluntary national reviews. And I call on all countries to kindly support this process as appropriate. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bala. I think the example of Nigeria is showing that SDG evaluation can be done, and it is well documented as well. There's information available. So the invitation in the beginning to follow the example, to think about doing evaluation at the national level, I think is there. And the ongoing process to have a UN resolution passed, we think is something that is very, very important, and that could effectively bring resources and bring attention to SDG evaluation. So it wouldn't be a marginal exercise, but it would come much more to the front, which is something we think is very much needed in view of the difficulties to achieving the SDGs with the current crisis that we have. Now, I would like to invite Ada to comment on the three experiences, focusing a little bit on the challenges and opportunities. Ada has been accompanying some of the processes of SDG evaluations, and she's currently working with governments in Colombia, Costa Rica, and Ecuador to help design, build, start working on SDG evaluation. So she's probably one of the persons that best knows the different regions and the approaches and that are pursued by the different countries. So Ada, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dirk. Good morning, colleagues. It is my pleasure to be with you today and together with these countries that are pioneering and leading the efforts towards country-led evaluations of the SDGs. When we talk about evaluation, as we have seen in this event, but also in many evaluation fora, we talk about, and we are proud to say that evaluation is about change, about contributing to change, about triggering change. Through evidence coming from evaluation, we can aspire to better and more equitable public policies, etc. However, 7 years down the line, after the endorsement of the 2030 agenda, we see that very, very few countries have undertaken country-led evaluations of the SDGs. So how decisions are being taken? How can we really understand what is needed to be done in order to accelerate progress towards the SDGs? And that is a question that I think we are collectively reflecting upon. We are, however, hopeful that many other countries, as Dirk has mentioned, are facing the challenge. And we have countries like Colombia that is in the process, has just finished the data collection phase. And we have Costa Rica undertaking the second evaluation, Finland undertaking the second evaluation, and Ecuador, Luis is at the back, that has decided to start its country-led evaluation of the SDGs. Luis, we really hope that next year you will be presenting the findings and the lessons of such an important evaluation. So let me focus a bit first on the challenges that at the same time, some of them are really opportunities that we have to take into account. I think that the first challenge worth to be mentioned is something that Bala has emphasized. That is the importance of understanding that to carry on country-led evaluation of the SDGs implies a political decision. A political decision to get political commitment, political will, and resources and buy-in, and also ownership of the evaluation to ensure that this evaluation is going to be used, that the evaluation is going to be useful, it's going to be influential. And however, we tend to focus a lot on the technical dimensions, which is good, but it's not enough. And it's not the way to start. A political decision to evaluate the SDGs it comes first and has technical consequences, but not the other way around. We tend to focus on the technical dimensions and talk about, oh, but what about the evaluability, whether the plans are aligned or no, so many indicators, so many targets, etc. And we get trapped in this discussion. And we have seen today, however, that the countries responsibly have taken a more practical approach. It means that they didn't disregard the technical aspects and the complexities, but they decided to go ahead. And in many cases, whether there is alignment with the national plans has been a post-facto exercise. It means that the evaluation per se has been able to demonstrate the extent to which these plans are aligned or not, and what is needed to be done. Of course, it is important to take into account that these are complex evaluations, are not evaluations as usual. Of course, there are many parts that we can take as we normally take, but there are some other elements, for example, as the three presenters have mentioned, the importance to take into account the principles, either as criteria and or principles that will inform the evaluation questions, the complexity of the exercise, it is taking into account a multilinear rather than a linear causality, etc. But also there is an opportunity here to demonstrate that we can go by various roads, and we have examples on that. We have different approaches that the different countries have taken, and we have a case that, for example, in the case of Peru, a rapid evaluation took place during the pandemic. Not exactly a real time, but a rapid evaluation that it's also that also has led to findings and to decisions at the policy level in the country. There is also a challenge in the way we design the evaluation, the way that we put use upfront. So we start by saying, how are we going to use this evaluation? Why is it important? How it's going to be influential? And that has to be planned since the very beginning. And also to think not only that the evaluation will serve the needs of the country, will inform policies, but there is a global commitment here. And we have to take that into consideration, that evaluations have to only contribute to global learning, have to have a global value added. Countries have endorsed the 2030 agenda, and therefore they have a responsibility, not only at the national level, but also this global level responsibility. As the presenters have mentioned, and especially Carolina has put emphasis on this, these evaluations also need continuous capacity development, orientation, convincement from the political level to the multi-stakeholder actors that will be involved, and that are important if we align the evaluation exercise with the principles of the 2030 agenda. There has to be a multi-stakeholder approach where different stakeholders are involved in the process. Bala has mentioned a capacity building session that they started the evaluation with the MNE from different sectors. I had the luck to be there, and there were many other stakeholders, and I think that's one of the strengths of the Nigeria evaluation as well as the others. So multi-stakeholder engagement is not only necessary, I would say it's an ethical and political responsibility to engage stakeholders. That can be a challenge, but also an opportunity. Some opportunities that I didn't mention that is important is that experience already exists. When these countries started, there was practically nothing, and it was really difficult to take off. Now we have experiences that have been documented already, and we have evaluation reports, systematization of good practices, and briefs, and many others. We also have a guidebook on how to design and plan evaluations of the SDGs that has been done by a partnership made of DEVAL, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, EVAL SDGs, UNICEF, I don't remember whether I forget some, and Nigeria, and IIED, of course, and also Costa Rica. So the guidebook is available for free download in the various websites, and it's available in 3 languages, in English, Spanish, and French. There is also an opportunity to really incorporate the principles of the 2030 agenda and demonstrate how are we not only progressing towards targets and goals, which is important, but if we incorporate the principles and we are able to account on those principles, we are actually aligning our evaluation exercise with the transformative nature of the 2030 agenda. The 2030 agenda is not just achieving goals. It has a transformative nature dimension that we should take into account. There is also a task force that Bala has mentioned that is working to advocate for country-led evaluations of the SDG, and it supported Nigeria in its leadership towards a new UN resolution. And as Bala has mentioned, would be good if you talk with your governments, talk with your missions in New York, and ask them to support this process. finally, and I don't want to, there are also good practices, I said, there is the possibility to trigger political dialogue with these evaluations. And I want to pose and to explain an example very quickly about Finland. Finland decided to do its evaluation of the SDGs at the planning to have the evaluation results at the time that an national evaluation elections period was taking place. So they disseminated it widely. And what happened is the political parties took the recommendations, took the findings, and they used it in their political campaigns. So the party that won the elections had to use those findings and recommendations to work where they were in the government. And as one of the results, among others, of that is that Finland was the first country with a roadmap towards achieving the SDGs in the 2030 agenda. So that was not the only way that evaluation was used, but that's just an example. And yes, so it's important that we think about use, not only use, because use can be very instrumental, very practical, but also about influence, and taking into account that evaluation of the SDGs is for more, for better and more equal policies. It's about learning, it's about contributing to a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ada. I think very, very many points that have been come up in the individual presentations, some additional points and perspectives are inputs for the discussion already probably, but we're not there yet. Also, thank you for bringing Finland to the table. We don't have anyone here from Finland, but as we all know, and we sometimes tend to forget, the SDGs are not for the global south. The SDGs are for all the countries. I think the North is sometimes not getting the point still. Finland did get the point. Finland is involved, and we had very interesting discussions in this international working group between Nigeria, Costa Rica, and Finland. So having different perspectives, different continents, different hemispheres involved in this discussion, which I think is the SDGs is all about. And it's not learning from one side to the other, but it's learning both ways and putting things together intelligently and cooperatively. We move to the global level, a little shift in perspective now with Ana Rosa Solares from the Independent Evaluation Office of UNDP. She will present us the project of SDG synthesis. So the floor is yours. Would you talk from here, or you want to prefer to talk from
I'll talk
where you are?
here. It's fine here. Thank you, Dirk.
Okay, fine. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dirk. And good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be in this wonderful panel. I have to start by making just a quick correction. I was indeed the chief of corporate and thematic evaluations in UNDP for the last 12 years. But in the last week or so, I've become the chief of evaluative synthesis and lessons. And it's been an interesting journey because I've been conducting evaluations for over 20 years, but specifically in UNDP for 12 years. And we've come to the realization that we have a very strategic moment ahead of us, which is to really push for learning, really transition, because next we're going to have to think what comes after the 2030 agenda. So we started thinking of how to further promote learning. We've developed a number of evaluations, and they've gone so far. We've promoted national evaluation capacities. I myself organized 3 of these, but learning hasn't really gone as far as we wanted. So we decided to think of something that would bring the different evaluation lessons together and try to see if this would disseminate better, would stick better, and take us forward. So it's my pleasure to present to you the Global Coalition on Evaluative Evidence, spearheaded by UNDP and Global Affairs Canada. to promote synthesis of evaluative evidence organized around the 5 SDG pillars of people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships, as my colleague Eric already kindly presented for me. Thank you. Yes, okay. So the coalition at the moment has 28 UN entities, as well as the engagement of a number of bilateral partners such as Canada, Germany, Ireland, Korea, the Netherlands, and Spain. A few others is still in negotiation. We're also working very closely with multiple networks, of course, UNEG, IDEAS, EvalNet, partners, part of ECG, such as the World Bank and IMF, a number of other partners in the academic arena as well. And we are really hoping they will bring different voices. But beyond the 5-pillar synthesis, we really want to build a structure to be able to access information when it's most timely for different countries. So I'll keep going and talk a little more about this engagement. So as I was mentioning, we are at a turning point in the international development agenda as we rapidly approach the time when decisions will have to be made about the transition beyond the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030. What will come next? And this coming years will be key for the evaluation community to take the opportunity to provide decision makers with evaluative evidence to think of the work needed to get back on track from this massive regression due to this multiple crises, and also to accelerate results towards these goals and build back forward and beyond 2030. When the international community made this transition from the Millennium Development Goals, they were not evaluated properly. We didn't learn from it. We need to be able to do differently this time with the SDGs. The evaluation community has a very important role to play in ensuring the potential for learning from the SDGs experience in harnessing the for future benefits. In UNDP, we're getting together with these different partners, as we mentioned, to promote this 5 synthesis, but also to really design a utility-based structure that will be built in the process of developing this synthesis to store and generate synthesis of evaluative evidence with AI technology that in the future can be accessed at different times and in different formats as needed for decision-making throughout the world. So it is a real global initiative that needs to filter, organize, and make the information available. So the key objectives of this global coalition on evaluative evidence is basically to synthesize the existing evaluative data on what has worked, what has not worked, why, and where in the key areas under these 5 SDG pillars. The reason why we decided to work with the pillars and not individual SDGs is because of a key principle of the SDGs, which is integration. We cannot look at one single SDG and really capture depth of learning, depth of knowledge. The other objective of this initiative is to promote substantive insight on key barriers and enablers to accelerate SDG achievements. We have talked so much through the VNRs about acceleration of the SDGs, but we have not yet collected all this information in a synthesis piece that is easy to understand and truly multiply for true acceleration. Then we hope to identify evidence gaps that future evaluations could help fill. This is very important because we are all doing a lot, but perhaps we're duplicating efforts and there may be significant gaps that nobody's covering. Then we hope to provide policy recommendations, actionable policy recommendations to achieve the goals in these last 5 years before 2030 and beyond. Of course, we know it's incredibly challenging. It's not something easy, but if we don't start somewhere, which is by coming up with clear ideas of recommendations of what has worked and what has not, then it becomes even harder to accelerate anything. The purpose of this joint evaluative synthesis is to provide decision makers with lessons learned and recommendations for the achievement of these SDGs in the remaining of the 2030, but in an organized fashion around these five pillars, but also in a way that any of your countries can access an AI database and have a meeting with your minister and simply push a button and have access to information in a synthesized way. Yes, incredibly challenging, incredibly ambitious. We have yet to design how this is going to move forward, but we hope to count on multiple partners to guide us on this. So a preliminary analysis of the amount of evidence we can work with indicated these following numbers you can see in this slide. And this is very ambitious proposal, hopes to synthesize data from impact evaluations, national evaluations, systematic reviews, VNRs, hopefully LNRs.
That's right.
Let's see, and UN performance evaluation reports as well. Each, of course, treated differently, given its level of methodological and results, quality, credibility, and independence. So we will have to define a place, a strategy to really look at these different sources of evidence in a credible and useful way. Almost done. So we will start. The first synthesis will be on the partnership pillar. We hope to start now in November and present at least preliminary findings by the 2023 High-Level Political Forum. We decided to start with partnerships because, as we saw from the previous slide, apparently there's fewer data sources to synthesize. So it gives us a little more time to learn and test and pilot and then move to the other pillars. But still, in this pillar, we have 5 key areas, 19 targets and 24 indicators. So plenty to analyze, and we will still have to prioritize perhaps to 3 key areas to produce something in a very rapid way.
One more minute, please.
Yes, wrapping up. In terms of next steps, we are in the process of broadening partnerships. Welcome very much your suggestions. Also in the process of mobilizing resources, not just financial, but human resources, people with experience in doing synthesis and with AI capability to really guide us on putting this together. And we're hoping to explore evidence sources, really identify whether your countries have been able to organize data in databases or organize evaluations in databases that we can easily access, quality assure, define inclusion, exclusion, what is included in the different syntheses. We are in the process of preparing each evidence for each pillar and seeing whether to expand or not the evidence base. We're working with partners on tagging and mapping the SDG connections. As I've mentioned, we can't just look at partnerships alone. This pillar has only one SDGs, but of course it covers all the others, all our works. And we're establishing scope priorities, identifying key synthesis questions with development partners and external expertise. And finally, we're establishing a vision for this a governance structure with one steering committee for all 5 syntheses and specific management reference groups for each pillar, and identifying key experts and institutions for a technical advisory panel that will quality assure all this work. But most importantly, what I want to leave is really the wish or the expectation or the really huge ambition to go beyond 5 reports. We don't want to just simply deliver 5B reports to HLPF. We want to develop a global coalition and a structure that we can all continue to use utility-based whenever it's needed. So a lot of AI creativity and innovation will be needed. So I hope to count on everybody's collaboration. I look forward to answering any questions. And I leave perhaps a question. I welcome your guidance on sources, databases of evidence, especially of credible national and subnational evaluations, and how to prioritize the synthesizing of such a large amount of evidence most efficiently, as the idea is to have all these 5 reports and much more completed by 2025. So there's time to be used in this last 5 years for some improvements before we conclude the SDGs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ana Rosa. A round of applause. I think we've had fantastic presentations from the panel. We had prepared some questions to circulate for the panelists, but in looking at the time available, we'll skip those questions we had prepared, but rather open the floor to questions, comments you might have. So please, anyone wishing to ask or comment, raise your hands, as we still have time. Yes, please. First here, second the lady, and then the gentleman in the back.
Go ahead.
Please.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Saidu Amara. I am from Sierra Leone. I'm a director in the Directorate of National Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate in the Office of the President. Throughout the 4 days being here, or 5 days, I have realized the importance of the political will as opposed to the technocratic, aspect of evaluation. And that has resonated throughout. Just the experience of Sierra Leone, like my brother Bala is saying, we also are at the stage of, presenting the SDG to the UN agencies. The UNDP is strongly supporting the system wherein we can, have an online platform to showcase Sierra Leone's achievements. And by so doing, we are going to, Sierra Leone will go digital with SDG visualization. So we have gotten key MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies as a consortium collaborating to have this happen. So we have also selected, again, ambition, SDGs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 13, and 16. And we will do the presentation to the UN agencies and then move forward how we can develop a platform to showcase. Because the issue here is there is data, a lot of pockets, isolated, standalone data. How are we going to put all this together to showcase our achievement towards SDG? So Sierra Leone is on path, and I think we will learn from Nigeria because you have already launched the evaluation for one of them or two of them. So we will continue to engage and then learn from you so we too can follow the path. I think that's what I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. We continue directly with the second question comment from the lady in the middle of the room. Then we collect the third question and then we turn back to the podium for a moment. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dirk, and thank you to all the panelists and presenters for their insightful presentations on the various approaches that are being used to evaluate the SDGs. I noted a takeaway that there are different, I think, approaches that are being used, and countries can really see what would be most applicable in terms of, I think, capacities that exist. I saw that in Costa Rica, it was a thematic approach that was used, looking at one or two SDGs and taking one of the themes of the SDGs. I think that's the planet. I noted that in that presentation, they focused really on delving into an evaluation that looked at the SDGs performance in terms of the environment or climate change. What I didn't get clearly from that presentation is what underpinned that SDG, what framework was being used. I know that they talked about picking a theme from somewhere. I think there was somebody doing an evaluation. I wanted to find out whether within the national planning frameworks, the SDGs have been mainstreamed and that there are indicators specifically that are within the planning framework, whether it's a plan or strategy for the country, whichever, that you have localized these SDGs and that's what you are evaluating. I didn't get that clearly. Maybe that clarification would be useful. From Nigeria, I saw that it was a policy evaluation that was done. And I think there's some innovative model that is being used there for I think, generating the evaluation. What I didn't get is whether there was any, I think, field interaction. Maybe I missed it, but just some sort of learning in terms of the performance of SDGs from the voices of the communities. Maybe I missed that, I didn't get that. I noted that there's a tool being used with a statistical office to like gather some data. Yeah,
okay,
so that clarification would be very useful. And is it Brazil or?
Mexico.
Mexico. Yes. Mexico was very interesting to me. Yeah, I liked the presentation. It was very multidimensional and cross horizontal and vertical linkages that came out from there. Maybe a question I had from there is what data sources were used to do that analysis? Especially, I think at subnational level, I think there was an overlaying of data between the national or central level and the subnational level to compare some indicators in terms of performance. That was very interesting. We'd like to learn how the data interplay or interchange happened there, so that we see how we can replicate in our countries where the data sources at lower level is a bit scanty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The gentleman in the back in the middle. And please limit yourself to one question so we can have a little bit of more time.
Good afternoon,
to finish.
I have one simple question regarding our experience of SDG evaluation, basically progress report and BNR also. We have conducted 2 BNR in 2017 and 2020. And now next year, we are also going to conduct our BNR and 1 progress report in 2019. At that time, we faced the problem of scoping, scope of the evaluation. In case of SDG progress or BNR, evaluation of SDG comprise only the progress assessment regarding indicators to identify the progress status, or it includes other aspect of the implementation. That is the instruments applied, institutions involved, and investment performed. Also should be the scope of the BNR or not. I would like to know from our respected panelists. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the questions. I think we're almost running out of time, so I'm very sorry. We'll have the panelists in the room for another 5 or 10 minutes after we finish officially, so there's room to talk individually and solve questions. We try to wrap up in order to keep with the time we were dedicated for the panel. So I think it's one last round, a minute each. I'm sorry that we have so little time, but I probably took up too much time as a moderator, so apologies from my side. And we start directly with Carolina Zuniga from Costa Rica. Looking at the questions we received, picking up the ones that you think are most appropriate for you to answer.
Yes, I'll pick up the question from the lady, so we all can have time to respond back. Yes, our approach was a thematic approach. We pretty much took these 2 thematic, biodiversity and climate change, and we wanted to see how we with these two thematics, how we reach the SDGs, which SDGs have we reached, how these can collaborate with the advancement of the SDGs. In this case, we found out that different programs and projects of biodiversity and climate change pretty much help fulfillment or advancing in the agenda of 6, which will be number 7, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Pretty much the findings that we identify, but we also identified that we need to work a little bit more on the alignment regarding the design of the different programs and projects, so they can explicitly say how they're going to follow the path of the SDGs, how they're collaborating to reaching that agenda. And regarding the principles that was also part of the scope, we included the leaving no one behind, equity, and environmental sustainability, which is part of one of the most important topics regarding this thematic. So there.
Thank you very much, Carolina. We move directly to Mexico. Erico, please, if you pick up the questions that you think were for you.
Sure, Dirk. Thank you very much. The question about the data to make this analysis of regional gaps was first the multidimensional measurement of poverty by Coneval. Second, capabilities index by UNDP. It was an specific study using also the last results of multidimensional measurement of poverty. And third, the main aspect, I guess, is the regional dialogue tables organized by UNDP in an autonomous way with different sectors. Those are the main aspects of the study, and that's why we can compare those gaps.
Thank you very much. We move to Africa. Bala from Nigeria, please. Final comments addressing the questions.
Okay, thank you so much. I think the question around whether we conducted field evaluation, I think I mentioned that it was we even had to go to states and the local government to conduct primary research, and we had to interface with all the communities, and in fact school children, because we had it's on education, qualitative health, qualitative and inclusive education. On the question around the scope of the VNR versus evaluation, the scope of the evaluation, I think it's up to the countries to look at what they want. Like the 2020 Second Voluntary National Review, the HLP, the High Level Political Forum did not define the SDGs to be reported upon. So we choose 7 reporting SDGs based on our national development priorities, and we reported. I think next year there will be 5 SDGs to be reported on: SDG 7, 9, 11, and I think 17. Yeah, so then countries can choose among them which one do you want to evaluate if you have the time to report on that. But aside from that, you can actually prioritize the SDGs you want to evaluate based on your national development prior aspirations and priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Changing a little bit the order, Ana Rosa, I would like you to come up with a final statement looking at the questions received, if you please.
Thank you so much. Okay. What I really want to add, it's, you've heard from amazing presenters and, really interesting questions, but an interesting component that we tackled here is really looking at the different SDGs, evaluating SDGs, but at no moment, only now our colleague Carolina mentioned one of the principles of the SDGs, which is leaving no one behind. A key aspect, which I have a feeling is very weak in our SDG evaluations, the understanding of intersectionality, the understanding of a commitment a political commitment of reaching the furthest behind first. And I really think this is something we cannot forget. If we came here to learn or to share lessons on how to evaluate SDGs, I think we're failing miserably in covering the principles, which is a key difference between the SDGs and the MDGs. So I just wanted to leave this final comment, which is, moving forward, we have to understand the principles behind the SDGs and not just work sectorially by each of those little 17 numbers, but really work in an integrated way. Think of intersectionality, understand where it's intersectionality, which I understood a lot of people didn't even know what it was, but it is a key principle. We're doing a disservice to our evaluations if we're not covering these principles and learning from there to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Rosa. Final thoughts, comments from your part, Ada, from Ideas, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that we still need to move forward and to make progress collectively and to reflect collectively on the importance of doing both BNR and country-led evaluations. So we prepare our BNRs, we present them, we conducted our evaluations exercises. So what? I think that the purpose has to be clear, and the purpose is to have evidence-based BNRs to influence policymaking, policy decision-making, and to have evaluations to also influence policy decision-making and to make a contribution to the global level. If we are just thinking of presenting our progress and having a presentation on that, and I think that is not enough. That is important, but it's not really aligned with the aspirations of the 2030 agenda that all countries have signed upon. We have, I think, the political and ethical responsibility to move beyond just presenting our data and our progress, and even more, just presenting them on numbers. And here I want to tackle between the difference between BNRs and country-led evaluations of the SDGs. They are complementary exercises, but are completely different. BNRs are focusing on the monitoring aspects, the analysis on to what extent the gaps with the public policies, the national plans, has been a reduction of the gaps between different sectors of society. Is not clearly there. To what extent we are achieving the SDGs with equity, leaving no one behind, with environmental sustainability. The level of analysis is completely different. We need evaluation to understand the reasons behind the numbers and to understand who is benefiting from the policies, the public policies, and in which way. To what extent we need to make adjustments to really accelerate progress towards the SDGs. So there is a feeling that if we do BNRs, we have done what we needed to be done. And the answer is, what changes are we triggering if we just focus on BNRs? It's going to be very, very limited. So I think we need to reflect collectively, and we need to understand the need to undertake evaluations of the SDGs. And that's why we are moving towards a new UN resolution, because we are convinced of the importance and the power of evaluation to actually influence policies and to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ada. Applause. And thank you also to the other panelists for their final comments. I will not intend to do a synthesis, which would be virtually impossible to do, but just let you see that we are quite convinced, and this is a call to get involved in the different levels. Let's do SDG evaluations. Don't be afraid. They're complex, but they can be tackled. It has been done. It can be done. So thank you very much for being here. Apologies to all of those that had questions and didn't get the chance to ask them. As I said, panelists will be around. We'll have another 5 or 10 minutes to individually or in smaller groups discuss some of the things. Thank you very much. Another big round of applause for this excellent panel, and have a great lunch and a great afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much.